Real estate commissions just changed forever at the end of 2024. Here's what buyers and sellers need to know. There's been a lot of changes.
There has been a lot of change. Well, there's been a lot of changes, but at the same point, not a lot has changed. And I think that that is kind of the world we're in right now. So the changes essentially are the buyer now has to sign a contract with their agent and agree to pay them a certain amount, right? And it's negotiable, but in the contract, that's what you have to negotiate. And then the seller has to pay their agent like they normally have for listing the home. Now, there is something called a seller compensation agreement that is part of the offer that you submit to the seller that makes them, or not makes, but allows them to cover the cost of the buyer's agent. But they do not have to agree to that. So, so as a buyer, you could be on the hook for your agent's commission or compensation.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Some states did it totally different before the 2024 ruling. So here in Minnesota, not a whole lot changed because we were already disclosing some of those things. But I know that it's been an upheaval in other states because it's totally different. And then you take that layer of trying to explain it to consumers, and it's really hard. I mean, it should be simple. In some ways, it made it more confusing.
Yeah, like there was a couple things where it has made it more confusing. One of the biggest things that I see is agents being shady about the buyer broker, which is the contract that the buyers are signing with an agent. So, the right way to do it is let people know this is a buyer broker. You would be hiring me. This contract is, for 3 or 6 months. I will be your agent, et cetera, et cetera. And legally, you're not allowed to show a home without the buyer broker. Like I can't just say, Tara, let's go see a home and we don't have a buyer broker. Like we have to have a buyer broker.
Or in Minnesota, we can do a showing agreement, which is still an agreement in writing, but it doesn't constitute representation, but it is still an agreement in writing. So,
okay.
Yeah.
We can do a buyer broker for the day, just for like the one thing we go see. But I don't like to do that personally because I don't want to deal with people that aren't serious. I'm expecting people, I'm okay to do that on one house if you want to get to know me. I get it. But, if we're going to find a house together, like we're going to be working as a partnership, and but some shady things that I've had happen is like these clients of mine had a buyer broker agreement with me. They went to an open house, and you're allowed to go to an open house without any representation, but if you make an offer, that I'm still your realtor basically. But the realtor said, hey, I have a home down the road. Do you want to go see it? And they said, sure, because they're thinking like, we're at an open house. This guy's here. He's got another house that might be good for us. So when they get to the door, he hands them a piece of paper and he's like, this is fine. You just got to sign this really quick, whatever, right? So they just sign it because, it's a lot of pressure and it's like a lot of words. And, he just said something like, it's just so I can show you this one house. Well, they got in a 6-month contract with him on a buyer broker agreement. They were already in a contract with me on a discuss, and they knew it, on a discuss buyer broker agreement. They didn't want to switch agents. They were super happy with me. But now they're like, and luckily they said something to me. Luckily they were like, hey, we like signed this thing with this guy. And like, I'm like, let me see it, send it over. They weren't interested in that house, So now I'm like, you guys are in a contract for 6 months with him. I go, basically, if you buy a house now, you have to compensate my brokerage and his brokerage. So basically, you can't buy a house now for 6 months. And they're super mad because they don't even know this guy. They don't know his name. Like, you know what I mean? And so it's just really shady.
Was he going to cancel?
No, just shady practices, like that, where he's like, no, they signed with me and, whatever, like I'm their realtor now, kind of thing. So they then had to wait 6 months before they could keep looking. And it's really unfortunate. Cool. Yeah, it's unfortunate. And that kind of stuff is happening. And that's why, ever since that happened, I now educate my clients, like, don't sign anything with anybody else for any reason. If they're trying to get you to sign something, text me or call me, because I do think there's some shadiness because it's very unregulated right now. I've also seen buyer brokers that are very unfair, that are like 5%. And if you don't buy anything or renew by the end of the term, you owe me, $500. I mean, people they sign things because they don't read them and they don't know, and it's all new. But it is something that you need to really sit down and think about.
It is. And I get it as a client, if you have to sign something with somebody in order to look at a house, it is or it can be nerve wracking because it's like, what if I don't like this person? Or what if I don't like the house? It's like, okay, ask that person some questions or flush it out. Or if you're, don't know, then ask the questions because it is, even as an agent, to like have a piece of paper to be like, here, sign this. It's like, no, let's go through everything step by step. Here's what it means. What questions do you have? And, at the end of the day, maybe it's a mutual thing where it's like, I've shown homes to clients and we didn't really click or jive, and there was nothing that I did wrong or nothing that the clients did wrong. It was just different style and different expectations. And it's like, okay, hey, like, I think you should call this agent. I think that, maybe that's a better fit. So yeah, it really is hard to sign an agreement and feel like you're stuck, whether it's the agent side or the client side, because it is a mutually binding, a mutual promise of an agreement.
Well, and you do have to make sure it's the right agent, right? You want to make sure they're going to be on the ball, because before you could have an agent be like, this agent sucks. I want to go see a place. They can't go till tomorrow night. I want to see it right now. It just listed, so you do get yourself kind of stuck. So you do need to make sure the person does it full time. They're going to be available for you to see a house, because that's one of the biggest things is see houses when you want to see a house, because you can't, if it's a good deal, you can't wait days, and so you need to be sure that they or someone on their team can help you. But then the other thing is that you have to understand that when you're getting into this contract, like, yes, it's binding, but at the same time, you're going to know if you have to pay my commission. So I always tell, because people get worried about that. Like, I don't want to pay your commission. I want the seller to cover it. And I'm like, you know what? Right now, the seller is covering it in 99% of deals.
Yep.
But when you go into a deal, you're going to know. So you're never going to be like, actually, they're not going to pay for it. You could on the offer, but you're never going to accept if that's how you feel, then you're not going to accept an offer where you're paying my commission. So we just move on. So it's not like, I think people get scared because they're like, I'm going to get stuck in a situation where I have to pay you. And it's like, no, that's not going to happen, because you're not going to accept that offer. And yes, you might lose a house over it, but you're not going to accept that offer. But it's funny, I had my first situation this weekend ever where the seller refused to pay my commission. And
any of it at all?
Any of it. And it was interesting. He had now, here's the deal. He's going to have a hard time selling that place to anybody with that attitude. But the thing is that this girl really wanted this place and she didn't want it to sit. So I talked to his realtor. So his realtor is taking a commission cut to then credit my buyer, basically. So they're paying for part of it, not him, but his realtor is. But that was the first time I've ever dealt with that. And honestly, because, at least in our market, because it's a buyer's market.
Yeah.
The sellers are paying commission. And this guy, honestly, if we wouldn't have bought it, I don't think it would have sold. You just needed that perfect situation where she has the money. She's really excited. She doesn't want it to sit and lose it. But most people aren't going to do that, in my opinion, right now. However, if it ever turns back into, or when it turns back into a seller's market, then I think that's when people are going to have to start paying their agent out of their own pocket.
Yeah. And when I do like an estimated net proceeds sheet for a seller, I run it with different scenarios. So they know, like, hey, some agents might request, 2.25 or 2 or 2.7, whatever the payout is that they have with the contracted for the buyer. So, I mean, number one, commissions are always negotiable. And number two, that buyer can request, or that agent can request, with their buyer, whatever they agreed to a seller. And at the end of the day, most sellers just look at their net proceeds when they're comparing two offers. And maybe one side is asking for a little bit more buy side commission, but their offer is still net higher. So even though, like, just where those buckets of dollars are going, that seller is still walking away with more than the other offers they got. So it just really depends on how everything shakes out. And, buyers are treated well, and their agents are compensated fairly for the job that they do.
Exactly. And I would say too, though, that, your realtor also can hold the line. They're negotiable, but once signed, they're not. So I had a deal where we were on a tight, my seller was on kind of a tight profitability, selling. And we really wanted this agent to take his 3% commission to 2.5%. He would not do
Yep.
it. Like he would not do it. So then we had to put that back on his buyer because we couldn't afford to pay 3% and still be profitable. But he
Yep.
would not move an inch. And I don't necessarily ever judge people for that. A couple of reasons. One, I don't know how much work he has put into this. I mean, some people you show 50 houses over 2 years to, and then for me at least, I'm less likely to move my commission because I'm like, I have put in so much work. Other people, we go out twice and they buy something, right? I'm much more fluid with commission if I need to be on those situations. So it really
Yeah.
just depends on, you know, the situation, but I always do think I like realtors that are willing to move their commission to get deals done. Like I am big on that. And even this, situation with I had this weekend where the seller would not pay any of my commission and my buyer did not want to pay all of my commission. They wanted to split it 50-50, which is fair, but he wouldn't budge. Like I pressed on his realtor, like, listen, like I'm going to lower my commission a little bit, but I expect you to do the same thing. Like if I'm doing it, you're doing it, right? Because we need to get this deal done. And he agreed to do it and I agreed to do it. And that's kind of where we came to saving my buyer some money and, figuring it out, right? But you need realtors that want to get deals done. Like that's a big thing. If you have a realtor that's like, I'm not going to move, I don't care. And I see it all the time. I see it. Like it happens all. And then we're like, okay, well, we can't do the deal now because you're not gonna budge, and it is what it is. They move on.
I have a couple of realtors that are like, nope, this is what it is, and that's what I'm doing, and I am not discounting to get a deal done. Maybe they gave their discount on the front end discount. It's all relative.
It is relative.
Like, if you have that conversation, then you need to know about that. But it's like, if you're this close and, I get the whole thing where it's like, if you give an inch, they take a mile type, scenario. But I'm with you. It's like, if we're this close to getting somebody into a home to let that seller move on and we can be creative on how to get something done, that's great. And sometimes that's commission, but sometimes it's one time there was a piano in this house and the sellers did not want to deal with it and the buyers absolutely did not want it. I called up two of my buddies and I said, hey, I need help hauling this stupid piano out of this house.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're not going to sign the papers. And we literally hauled it to the dump and it cost me $100, but we got it done, so.
Well, I just like to get, and that's why I like to keep my commission started at 3, but I'm willing to move it for, to get a deal done. But that's why I don't like to start it low because then there's nowhere for me to move it. Then it's like, okay, this is just what it is. And that doesn't help get deals done. But like I have a deal, this guy is trying not to foreclose on this property. It's overpriced. Like I'm moving my commission all the way down to 1% because we had it at 2.5%. And it's not selling. And I'm like, this needs to be cheaper, but he can't make it any cheaper. Like he is negative, right? So I'm like, if I take my commission down to 1%, then this can be a deal that could go through. And then whatever realtor comes, we can only pay them 1.5%, but that is just what it is. We don't have any more money. You know what I mean? And but the
price point of that house is probably quite high, or in relative to our markets, probably
totally is. Exactly. Yeah, like you would still be fine. But it's like, because of that, we were able to lower the price point like 20 grand. So now we're getting showings where before we were just too overpriced. We weren't even getting showings. We tried. So now it's like, now we're in the market. And I always tell the seller, like, you might have to give her a little too. Like, you might have to come out of pocket 5 or 6 or 10 grand, right? Like you might, I know you don't want to, but you might have to, but at least now we're going to get offers and we're getting showings at least. But it's that kind of stuff. Cause a lot of realtors would say pound sand, but to me, I understand this is the only way this deal is getting done. It's not the guy doesn't want to pay me. It's not that he doesn't value me. Yeah. It's literally the only way this deal is getting done. And it might not even, it might need to be lower and it might not be able to get done at all. But I want to get a shot of getting this guy's house sold and saving him from foreclosure. So, that's what you want, a realtor that's on your team, not somebody that's, and when you try to find a realtor that's the cheapest going in, there's these like discount realtors. I work with them sometimes. They're the worst. They don't care. They don't answer their phone. They don't negotiate. They don't care if the deal gets done or not because they have more deals going in order to make a living. And so they're just, they're not paying for marketing. They're not paying for photos. They're not, they don't, they're not invested. You're kind of like, you're a person that wanted the cheapest thing. They're the cheapest thing. They have an understanding they're the cheapest thing, and they don't feel like they need to do a lot of work because they're not getting paid that much. So they're like, whatever, and that's kind of,
Yeah.
you get what you pay for situation.
It is. It is. And especially depending on the market and the level of competition, you have to have an agent that knows how to position your property as the seller within the market. And if that's professional listing photos or drone photography or marketing on specific local and regional platforms, you have to know that, and you're not going to get that from a discount broker. Especially if your property is unique or interesting or at a higher price point than maybe the area average, going with the discount broker is going to end, it might be cheaper in the short term, but you're going to leave money on the table at closing, which is worse, you know?
You do, and they also care about that price point too, because, if it sells for less, they get paid less, like assuming it's 1% or something like that, right? And so they're not really willing to like negotiate, like for me, it's like, okay, if you're going to pay this, you're going to pay that, I'll take money off the table, that kind of thing. That gets deals done. When you're just hard nosed, it doesn't. And I mean, even with the seller, like he was totally hard nosed, wouldn't move, like the deal almost fell apart, but
Yeah.
only because his realtor took a commission hit did it work. But if his realtor didn't have a commission hit to take, it would never have worked, and how many days is it going to sit on market?
Yeah.
Beyond, you know what I mean? The 20 some that it's been on right now. And so I don't,
Yeah.
it's the thing about a listing agent that people don't realize is you don't really know what they're doing behind the scenes. What I
Yeah.
mean by that is I've had listing agents where I've had cash buyers and I can't get a hold of them. I've had listing agents where it's under contract, but it's still accepting backup offers. I want to go see it with the client. They don't get back to me because they don't want to do the paperwork again. And then that deal falls through. And then they're reaching out to me and we've already offered on another property and we're not interested.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're listing. A listing agent does not just list a property. They are the communication between the other realtors and seeing the place and then selling them on the place. And you would think
Yeah.
everyone would just approve showings and be active and, but they're not. You can't get a hold of them. I mean, I had a guy last week. We wanted to get a hold of him. We submitted an offer. Didn't even hear back from him for 48 hours because his phone got hacked. But apparently that also meant his computer, or I don't know. And then we moved on. Like we didn't hear back from him. They found another. There was debating between two houses, and the seller will never know he lost that deal for them ever. But he did.
Yeah.
Because he has to present the offer. He doesn't have to say, I got this 2 days ago and my phone got hacked. He tells me that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the truth is, like, you just don't know what you're getting. You just assume everyone just does the same thing on the back end.
Yeah, and even when it comes to like returning calls from realtors or title companies or lenders to get the home sold, there's also like the online platforms, the social media, which yes, it's kind of, buzzwords, but you can show tangible like, hey, we've gotten this number of views on your listing. We've gotten this number of, reactions or exposure on these different platforms. And that's tangible too, where it's like, hey, if your seller is, I don't want to say like disgruntled, but, not getting the offers or showings that they want, but you can show them like, hey, we got this many views on this website and this many views on this platform and whatever. Like, do you feel that you're getting enough exposure? And a lot of times it's like, okay, yeah, that's true. Well, then maybe it goes back on price, but good agents are able to articulate that. And if you list with a discount listing or, some of these platforms online where you just pay like a flat fee and your house gets on the MLS, that's not enough to sell homes, especially in a buyer's market. It's just not.
Yeah. And especially for the price you want. Like, we had this townhome and I had it listed and I had feedback from one of the realtors because I always try to get feedback. Like I reach out and they said, the home was really nice, but when we went on the patio, it smelled like cigarette smoke. And my my sellers weren't smokers. So I go there and I realize that the neighbor smokes on his patio. So, and it just obviously wasn't. So what do? I went on Amazon. I bought like a ventilation thing that sucks the, smoke out of the air. I knocked on the neighbor's door. I said, hey, couple things. We're trying to sell this house. It smells smoky, but also look at this cool machine I got you. Do you mind running this when you're smoking outside? Plus, it'll make your patio not smell. And they were like, that was so nice. And they've been using it, right? So it's like, those are the things that you have to care, like problem solvers. Like, we have a problem.
That's awesome.
We have to solve it. Like, we don't want to say don't smoke on your patio because they're going to and it's their house and they can do whatever they want. But now they have a nifty little machine that's going to suck the smoke out of the air so that our patio doesn't smell like an ashtray, because that probably is why it wasn't selling. Like, when I was there, it wasn't like that. So they must not have smoked recently or something, but now that it is like that, we have to fix it. And so that's what you want, because I always think, like, if a house is priced correctly and it's not selling, like, why? There has to be a reason. So then you have to start digging and getting feedback, and it's important, but it's really just the person, the people that are on your team when it comes to selling a house, because we could have had to deduct $10, $20, $30,000 from that place to get it sold if it just keeps sitting and sitting and sitting. But because of that, this was recent, I think that it's going to now sell. I think that was the issue.
Yeah. Yep. And that's awesome. And it's just little stuff like that makes such a big difference. And your agent makes the difference. Like, a different agent, if it wasn't you, if it was somebody else, they might have just, hey, we got to drop the price. This is, it's
you
not
got a
selling,
smoker.
drop the price.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, your patio smells like smoke. We have to drop the price. There's nothing we can do about it. And it's like, that is not necessarily a problem-solving agent. If you're when I talk to my clients about dropping the price, it's because we are too high. Like, I'm watching what's going under contract. I'm comparing it to our property in our area. That's the only time. If we're priced right, and unless you're just in a super big hurry for some reason, which happens sometimes too, then we have to figure out, is it the photos? Is it the cover photo? Is it, what is it? There's some reason that you do have a funny smell in the house. Like, what's going on that the house just isn't selling? You have to kind of get down. A lazy agent just blames it all on the price. It sometimes is, and you have to be honest with your buyer or your seller about that. But if it's not the price, you've got to figure out what it is. Like, we were just visiting this one property, and we're going to make an offer, and I'm looking at all the comps, and one of the comps was so low. And I was like, there's something going on with this. But I noticed it had been listed for a long time and it had kept dropping. And it was the last one that sold. So, like, I was really interested, right? And it was like $100,000, maybe a little more than $100,000 lower than the rest of the comps. And these are all the same layout. So I'm like, what's going on? So I'm looking at the pictures, and, like, it's painted, like, there's red walls and there's, it's like more artistic vibe or whatever. So I texted the agent and I said, I noticed this one sold for, like, a lot less. She goes, yeah, I think it was the red walls. Like, I think that, and I'm like, it would have been like,
oh my God,
less than $10,000 to paint the walls. Like, it would have been like, so if it were my client, I would have said, this isn't selling. Let's paint the walls white for like $7 or $8,000. And then, so it was just funny because, once again, a lazy agent just says, just drop the price, drop the price, drop the price. And they did. And honestly, I wish I would have found that property because it was such a smoking deal and somebody could have painted for $7 or $8,000, right? But, and she's not wrong. It could have been the red walls because buyers have a really hard time looking around that kind of thing. It was a very bright red. But that's where you come in as the agent and you say, we've listed it for 2 weeks. We've had no hits. And now I think that the walls are an issue, So it's just like, when they go straight to price, I'm like, that's not, this cost this person over $100,000 for something that would have been like maybe a $10,000 fix. Because that was they're all the same. They're all the same unit, same finishes, same everything. So unless it smelled bad, that's what I was thinking. It smelled. I was like, maybe they smoked in the unit. Maybe it smelled bad. Maybe there was like dog hair everywhere. And she's just like, no, I think it was the walls. And I'm like, oh okay. And I just said, okay. But I'm like, that's not a good solution, is to drop the price over red walls,
No, that's so crazy.
It really is. But yeah. And I guess the point of this video is, don't be afraid of the buyer broker. I actually like it. It makes your agent commit to you and you commit to your agent. You just have to make sure upon entering it that it's a fair agreement and for your market, and that you can negotiate it, and that you also understand it. I walk through it with people. Don't ever just sign something, like, I'm just signing it, really look through it. I mean, if you don't buy anything, what happens? Do you owe money at the end? Like what's happening in the agreement? And I've seen agents, hey, I'm going to write it for 5%, but I can lower it. I've heard of that. And I'm like, and I know people that do that. And I'm like, no, write it for what you're going to get paid, because yes, you can say that, but nobody's paying 5%, A. And B,
Yeah.
so your buyer's going to have to come out of pocket for some of that. And B, just because you said you can lower it, you don't have to. So, as a buyer going in, I would say, I know you said you can lower it, but I want to feel comfortable with whatever percentage this is. So this is where I want to be at.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you go to, like, I don't know, I'm sure it works in Arizona the same, but if you, let's just say, do, like your instance of a 1% or 2% on a buy side, but a seller is offering 2.5, you cannot accept the higher amount.
You can't.
So that's where it gets tricky when you're doing a buyer's representation contract, because you don't want to not be able to accept compensation that a seller is offering in order to get that house sold either. So it's kind of finding that happy medium on what's market centric. And I don't want to say normal or customary. Like there's no commission fixing. There's no price, that's standard. Like we see it all over the board, but there's 100 numbers between 2 and 3. Maybe it's 2.2, maybe it's 2.7, maybe it's 2.65. Like there's no standard or golden rule on what it is. So being able to negotiate on the sell side, but also on the buy side, both. And that's why I think that the NAR ruling that, has been out for a little while now, it created a little bit more confusion, but also more transparency at the same time. So there's definitely pros and cons of it. But overall, consumer choice has increased. And I would say, pros and cons all set aside, it's a good thing that things have changed.
I do. I think so. And I know in Arizona, I would say, it's always negotiable, but I would say, between 2 and 3, I'd say between 2.5 and 3 is kind of what is standard, as you would say. But I'd say that I know new builds can pay up to 4%. So I do know that, to your point, if you only accept 3 and then they're paying 4, you can't take that difference. But here's what I would say as someone looking is, are you looking for new builds? If you're looking for new builds, then doing 4 is probably, a negotiation that you could do, because that is what the new builds are paying for. But as far as sellers go that I've seen, it's been hard to get them to pay over 3. So like you just have to keep that in mind when, I get so if you're looking for new builds, but if you're not looking for new builds, then it probably, you know what I mean? You probably don't need to go to 4, so you just have to think of that. You don't, as a buyer, personally, I would not want to sign something that is above what I feel the standard is, by asking around, by talking to people, because then you could be on the hook, right? And so you that's why, if somebody presents like a 5% offer, it's like, I've not ever seen somebody pay 5%. So,
when the trouble comes where a buyer that hasn't bought a home before, it's a foreign language. So they don't know what is customary or what is average or what is within the range of acceptable. Like they might not know. That's kind of the scary part when, first time home buyers. So then if you don't know what the numbers are or what's normal, then ask your friends, ask people who have bought or sold houses recently, ask for referrals of, hey, if you were going to buy a house, would you work with, did you have a good experience, those sorts of things, because then at least you're getting a great person with ethics, with morals, with experience, because you might not even know the questions to ask if you've never done it before, you bought or sold on either side. So,
and I think a good question for your realtor is, if you need to lower I'm signing at 4%, let's say. If you need to lower your commission to make a deal work, what is the minimum you're comfortable taking?
Yeah.
Now, they don't have to honor it because you're signing, but I think that that's a good, if they say, well, I probably wouldn't budge, or if they kind of hesitate and they're like, well, maybe a 1/4 point, then you just kind of know where you stand, if they're super friendly, like, oh my gosh, I would, take it all the way down to 2.5, like then I would feel more comfortable. And I always say the answer is in the not what they say, but what they do, right? So
Yeah.
is there a hesitancy where they're like offended and then kind of give you an answer? Or are they super like, yes, anything to make a deal work? I would do this, I would do that. I've done this. This is what I've done in the past. Like those are huge because I always like to read between the lines on people a lot of the time. And,
Yeah.
you'll be able to tell right away. It was funny. So this is like a random story, but I think you'll appreciate it. Ken and I were looking for a designer for the house. And I was asking every designer, if we don't like what you choose, what do you do? And we had really liked this one guy. And he stopped and he kind of like, he's like, well, I mean, if you don't like what I pick, like, I mean, we can try to work around it or, and we realized like it would not be a good relationship because if we don't like what he does, he's not going to be happy. Right. And then we had other designer that we ended up picking where she's like, oh, if you don't like it, you just let me know. And then I go back to the drawing board and, so those are it's not what they say, it's how they say it. Because you throw them off. That
Yeah.
question's going to throw somebody off. And I wouldn't text it. I would ask it because
Yeah.
and then their initial reaction to that question, their initial like gut response is how they feel about it.
Yeah. And so I totally agree with that and seeing how that goes forward. But then depending on what side you are, I also think, okay, if your agent can't negotiate like their own commission payment, then how are they going to go to bat for you on negotiating repairs from an inspection or negotiating an overpriced listing for you? So I really do think that good agents are able to strike a great balance in different situations, and asking the question like that is very telling of their capabilities.
Yep. Well, awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in. If you're interested in investing, Tara and I have an investment guide that you should check out. You can also email us or follow us on Instagram for a lot of great information.
Thank you.